KU Office of Graduate Military Programs, the KU Army ROTC, and the Department of Military History at the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. My name is Michael Scott, and I am a member of the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board, the official student group of the Institute. The SAB is a bipartisan group. As a member of the SAB, I get access to many great opportunities by being involved with the Institute. If you are a KU student and are interested in joining, please contact us by emailing dolesab@ku.edu. For this evening's event, if you would like to know more about our guest, the event itself, upcoming Institute events, and more, you can download a printable program handout. The link is in the YouTube event description. At the end of this evening's event, we will have time for you to ask questions of our guests. Please type your question in the YouTube chat box on your screen. Please hold all questions until the end of the program. The Dole Institute's mission is to foster civil and respectful discussion around important and often difficult topics. Please phrase your questions with this in mind. Questions that are distracting, disrespectful, or attempt to dominate the chat will be deleted and the user will be removed. This evening's program is closed captioned for the hearing impaired. And now, please join me in welcoming Director of the Institute, Bill Lacy.
Thank you very much, Michael, and welcome to everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership Lecture. I have two program announcements I'd like to share with you before we go on. First, next Thursday night at this exact same time, Thursday at 7 o'clock, we will have U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer at the Institute, virtually, of course. Mr. Lighthizer will be our very first sitting member of a presidential cabinet to be part of a program at the Institute, so we're very excited about that. This Saturday from 9 to 11 at the Institute in the parking lot, and we will have an open house inside the building with social distancing and masks to go along with this. We will co-host a program with the City of Lawrence, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and other local organizations to honor veterans. The idea is veterans or veterans' families can drive through, pick up some special gifts and tokens of appreciation, since a lot of the veterans gatherings were not able to be held this week. And we couldn't even do our own in the Dole Institute that 300 of you come to every year. We wanted to do something else. And so if you'd like to take advantage of this, please do. I want to give a shout out to a very good friend tonight, Colonel Kevin Benson. Kevin helped us recruit our very special guest tonight. And Kevin, I just want you to know how much that I and the Dole Institute appreciate that. And with no further delay, it is my great honor to introduce, for the purpose of introducing our guest tonight, the Provost of the University of Kansas, Provost Barbara Bickelmeyer.
Good evening, and welcome to the Digital Dole Institute of Politics for the 2020 Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership Lecture. I'm Barbara Bickelmeyer. I serve as Provost of the University of Kansas. Tonight's discussion will be moderated by Bill Lacy, Director of the Institute. Our guest this evening is Major General Diana M. Holland. General Holland was the first woman appointed Commandant of the Cadets at the United States Military Academy in West Point. She was the first woman to hold the title of Deputy Commander of Support in a Light Infantry Division. She currently serves with the Army Corps of Engineers as the Commanding General of the Mississippi Valley Division and as the President of the Mississippi River Commission, both first for a woman in these appointments. Her military awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Medal, just to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Major General Diana Holland. Diana, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
General, it's great to have you as part of the Digital Dole Institute. I wish that we could actually be hosting you and getting to meet you in person tonight, but thank you so much for being part of it. Let me start with my very first question tonight. Can you tell us about your upbringing and your education?
Sure, thank you. And if I could start by also thanking Kevin Benson for connecting us and giving me this amazing opportunity. As I said before we went live, I'm both honored but also just a little intimidated to be a part of this. So such an auspicious forum. So thank you to Kevin, and thank you to you all for inviting me. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, California. For those who don't know where Santa Barbara is, it's right on the ocean. And I, from there, went off to West Point in 1986. I'm an only child. And so some people have that carries certain connotations to it, but wonderful family, wonderful upbringing, and we can get into this a little bit more later, but all the tools that I needed in order to pursue my dream of becoming an Army officer.
And where did that dream come from, General? I mean, was it like because other family had been in the military? Is it something you just aspired to when you were younger?
I think I would have to go back and say that my dad, from a very young age, when I was a very young age, my dad told me that I could do anything. Hang on, I'm getting a message on my machine here. That I could do anything I aspired to do, that I live in the greatest country in the world and the sky is the limit. And so he would say that to me frequently. And then when I was 6, I told him that I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps. I believe that came from him. He had been a Marine. He had a uniform. He kept things from his Marine Corps experience around the house. He talked about being a Marine. He'd only been a Marine for 3 years, and they weren't all happy memories that he had with the Marine Corps. But that was kind of the first hook. And then the other hook was my grandfather, who had also been a Marine in World War II. And he used to tell stories about the Pacific campaign and different islands and what he learned from it. And so these were life-changing events, being enlisted Marines. And so when I was 6, my dad had said I could do anything I wanted to do. And I said at 6 that I wanted to be a Marine. I am pretty sure that's not what he had in mind when he said that I could do anything I aspired to do. But I didn't give up. I kept talking about being a Marine. I showed more and more interest in the military. And so at some point along the way, he said, he advised me that if you want to be in the military, maybe you should look at going to college and being an officer. There's a lot of advantages to that. And about the time he was giving me that advice, women were starting to go to the service academies. And he mentioned, women are going to West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy starting this year. Maybe you should look into that. And really, that's what got me started. I started doing my own research as a young kid about the academies. I had encyclopedias sitting on my shelf in my bedroom, and I would look up each of those academies, read about their history, look at all the pictures. They were all interesting to me. Of course, all of the service academies are very special, but West Point really spoke to me. The big gray granite walls, the grandeur of that terrain, the fact that West Point was the oldest, known as the toughest, the fact that George Washington had stood there. I mean, it was part of the history of our nation. And all of that really captured my imagination. And so I got a copy of the application to go to an academy, and figured out, did the research and collected the intel on what it would take to get accepted. What were all the things I needed to do to be an attractive candidate. And so I number one, work hard in school. And that was something that my parents instilled in me very young. Had a very good education, had wonderful teachers in high school, public school system in Santa Barbara. And then participated in everything I could find that was remotely would make, again, build that resume. I was pretty focused, as you can tell from what I'm saying, at a pretty young age. I even joined my high school basketball team in order to have a sport. And if you were to see me in person, that would make you laugh because I'm only 5'1". And so the fact that I would choose to play basketball speaks to how committed I was to building that resume to eventually go to an academy. And so that's pretty much what got me to West Point in 1986.
And what was West Point like for women in the mid 80s?
I think, that's a multifaceted question, or rather there's many answers to that. I would say one of the things that stands out to me is how hard all of the women worked to assimilate, to be part of the team, to not be seen as somehow different from the rest of the Corps. At that point, we were wearing pretty much what resembled a man's uniform. We wore the straight tie. We all had to have our hair short. We all had to wear pants. There were only certain circumstances that you were authorized to wear the skirt. And I would say maybe even the first classes of women. So I was in the 10th class of women. Probably the earlier classes, there was even less room to make those decisions. But by and large, we tried really hard to fit in, to not draw attention. And of course, in that environment where you don't want to get yelled at anyway, you don't want to draw attention. It's certainly not the bad kind. So I think that was one of the characteristics of the times. And of course, I've served there now twice since being a cadet. And that is not, that doesn't seem to be the environment anymore. I would say other than that, there were some things that we did differently than men. Women didn't take boxing. All the men had to take boxing. That was a graduation requirement. So there were certain things that were different that we participated in separately. But by and large, it was a pretty well integrated Corps of Cadets. While our roommates would be the same gender, the neighbors on either side of our rooms would be male. And so as I reflect back on that period, it was not easy to make this integration possible and be successful. And they went to great lengths to make it as integrated as possible, which I think set us up very well to then go into an Army that was well on its way to integration of female soldiers.
Well, Colonel Benson taught me that the School of Advanced Military Studies is required, I believe, correct me if my facts are wrong, General, but is required for any U.S. Military officer who wants, or Army officer who wants to rise above the level of major. How did the education you got there at the School of Advanced Military Studies shape your career?
Going to SAMS, which is the acronym for the School of Advanced Military Studies, was one of the greatest decisions that I made in my career. It opened so many doors. The education itself was top-notch, very thought-provoking. I think helps make you be a very thoughtful Army officer. Think through second and third order effects. Think of consequences to the decisions, how to make recommendations that present all of the options to the decision maker, understanding and being able to articulate things in a concise way. Take the complex and communicate it in a very concise way. So the education was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. A lot of reading, a lot of writing, and we're all the better for it. But the long term was what it did for me as far as opening doors. That launched me into the 3rd Infantry Division. And why that matters is that at the time, it was not, how should I say, it wasn't easy for women to get into the division headquarters. As an engineer, it was not easy for a woman to get into any of those positions in a division headquarters. And I felt that I needed to be there to better understand how our Army fights, to meet more people and get outside of my comfort zone. I wasn't able to get to a division, that level, that type of organization, just based on what I had done to that point. By going to SAMS, that launched me to where I wanted to go and just opened so many doors. So it got me into the right seat in the 3rd Infantry Division. I went with the 3rd Infantry Division to Iraq, participated in some really interesting, high risk, high adventure type planning efforts, got to know a lot of people, got to sit in the room with high level decision makers, hear what they were thinking, hear what they were worried about, understand how we could help them think about the problem in a different way, and really contribute and attempt to make my mark. And then so that assignment alone, that SAMS really opened the door for me to get to, then opened a whole other, all kinds of other assignments that otherwise would not have been available to me, quite likely.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about your roles in both Afghanistan and Iraq?
Sure. My first deployment was to Iraq. I mentioned that I was in the 3rd Infantry Division as a planner. In that same deployment, midway through, I went to the 92nd Engineer Battalion that was co-located in Baghdad with the 3rd Infantry Division. So that put me down at more the tactical level to learn how engineers were helping the warfighter on the battlefield. The next deployments were to Afghanistan. So my second deployment was to Afghanistan as a battalion commander of the 92nd Engineer Battalion that I had spent some time in Iraq with. And then my third deployment was with the 130th Engineer Brigade back to Afghanistan. So my role in those two leadership positions in Afghanistan were as the commander. And of course, combat deployment takes on a whole new flavor, a whole new set of responsibilities when decisions you are making are going to make a difference, potentially, of the survival of your own soldiers, people that you're responsible for, and the families to whom you answer. And of course, those deployments take on a whole new feeling when that is on your mind at all times. In that deployment with the 92nd Engineer Battalion, the 92nd is a construction battalion, and the battalion was operating in the eastern part of Afghanistan and North Afghanistan, building bases, improving conditions for soldiers, out on the roads, and helping to ensure that convoys could safely move, rest overnight at different patrol bases. I mean, it was incredible. Our soldiers were all over the place and at great risk. And so it was always on my mind, have we set our soldiers up for, not just for success, that's great too. We want to be successful and we want to make things better for fellow units and other soldiers, but are we setting them up for success to survive this and to get home safely? And so that wears on you after a while. In the next time I went to Afghanistan as the commander of the 130th Engineer Brigade, very similar, but just much larger organization. At the time we got to Afghanistan, there were 5,000 soldiers under our brigade across all of Afghanistan this time around. It was a lot to take in. I think at that point was when I started to realize, truly appreciate the higher you go, the harder it is to have 100% understanding and be able to control as many things as you want to control, because the scope is just so vast and there's so many variables. But in both cases, in both of those deployments, my just tremendous respect for the American soldier and what they do. They step up and they do amazing things. And even in times, I guess I would share one story with you. In that first Afghanistan deployment as the commander of the 92nd Engineer Battalion, I mentioned the risk and the risk to our soldiers and my worry about that. And in the first 3 months that we were there, it was the surge of, let's see, the surge of 2010. President Obama had just ordered an additional surge in Afghanistan, and we were part of that additional force flow. And the first 90 days were, felt like a year, as much as we were asked to do and all the things that our soldiers were doing outside of the protection of a forward operating base, out on the roads, under fire, and all of those things. And as it started to slow down just a little bit, and we brought some of the soldiers back to the base to let them recoup and clean up and have a little bit of downtime. In my mind, it was time to give them a little bit of a breather and rest, and because they had really done a lot, and not have them so stressed and worried. And anyway, and interestingly, that's what I was thinking. And I happened to be in our motor pool one evening, walking, around, looking at our equipment, seeing what condition it was in. And I ran into a soldier who had been one of those soldiers out in really a place we were building a new forward operating base that was really in a part of Afghanistan that was very dangerous. The Taliban was known to operate there. And so, I'm thinking, here's one of the guys that was out there doing that, and here's one of the ones I felt like I needed to protect a little bit. And I said, hey, how you doing? And he was looking kind of down. And I thought, I asked him, what's going on? And he said, ma'am, I've been back for a week, but, I want to get back out there. I came here, I joined the Army, and I wanted to come to Afghanistan because I want to be out there doing the hard things. I want to be part of the solution that helps our fellow soldiers. I don't want to be back here in the comfort of this operating base. I want to contribute. And, I was completely blown away by that, but it showed me, our soldiers are just amazing. And, they would all say, send me, let me do the hard mission. That's what I'm here for. And that's what I signed up for. So it was, it's a lot of little memories and stories like that in those 2 deployments to Afghanistan. They were, like I said, pretty stressful, but also with stress comes great reward, and our soldiers never disappoint.
That's an outstanding story. Thanks for sharing. I always thought it was fairly ironic that Bob Dole, who was from Pancake Flat, Western Kansas, wound up in the 10th Mountain Division during World War II. You were the first deputy woman commander, or the first woman deputy commander of a light infantry division, and it was the 10th Mountain. What did that role entail?
Yeah, that was amazing. 10th Mountain. I know every unit is special, but the 10th Mountain Division was, in fact, and I'll just point this out. Over, let's see, I feel like I'm looking in the mirror here. So this snowshoe right here actually was my farewell gift from the 10th Mountain Division. That's actually a snowshoe that was made during World War II and had been in storage all these decades. They've got a bunch of them, a huge supply of them. And while I was at 10th Mountain, I used to see people departing and getting that snowshoe. I was there only briefly because I was then assigned, really honored to then be assigned as commandant of West Point. But in my short period there, I watched other people getting one of those snowshoes, and I thought, wow, if that is the souvenir, the gift to get from 10th Mountain, of course, because of its wartime history, World War II wartime history, and to get one of those really meant everything to me. It was, so I went there not sure what to expect. I was very well aware of the fact of the assignment, what it was going to mean for a woman to go to Fort Drum as a general officer. It's 10th Mountain because it's a light division and just because of its history and who gets assigned there. It's very Ranger Regiment focused. So a lot of, there aren't very many women in this organization. And it's a small post and it's way up in upstate New York. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it was going to be received, but I was really excited to have the opportunity. And interestingly, it's been one of the best welcomes I've ever had. They could not wait to prove that 10th Mountain was the place to be for everyone. And they showed that. They rolled out the red carpet. They're good to everyone. I wouldn't say that I was, Bill, can you still see me?
Yes, I can, General.
Okay, hang on. Let me just, my laptop just locked up. Let me just, okay. So they treated everyone really well, but it was just a very special place to be, very special history. I got included in everything. And I was still a colonel when I arrived, and the division commander, he was doing off on a lot of schools and temporary duty. My fellow 1-star was also a lot of temporary duty. And so I arrived there as a colonel, not even announced that I was going to be a general officer at some point. And Major General Bannister, who was the division commander at the time, he essentially told everyone, hey, I'm going to be gone a lot. The deputy commanding general for operations is going to be gone a lot. Colonel Holland is the acting commander when we are gone. And he basically told me, do what you think you need to do. You bring another perspective and it's going to be good for us. And by the way, we're looking to deploy later in the year, and you're going to be perfect for that, for part of the mission that we're going to do based on your background. And just keep me posted and go forth and learn and do great things. It was incredibly empowering. You know, I didn't expect, so not only was it a warm welcome, but then a commanding general, it really does go back to a leader who made it clear to the organization that I was one of them and to be treated like one of them. And then he gave me such free rein, and I so appreciated that trust. I really thrived there. And if it weren't for the fact that I then was selected to go be the commandant at West Point, I would have loved to have stayed in 10th Mountain to continue to enjoy that environment.
Well, you set up my next question perfectly. Thanks, General. I was going to ask you, you were the first woman commandant of the cadets, Corps cadets at West Point. What was that like, and what ideals did you try to instill in the students while you were there?
What was it like? It was like watching somebody else's story play out. I couldn't believe that. I still can't believe that I had the opportunity to be that. It was to be in that position. It was truly amazing. I love West Point. You know, I talked about my dream to go there, and I was as enthusiastic as a cadet, even as a plebe, to be there as I was enthusiastic about that application to attend there. And my enthusiasm for the place has never diminished. I taught there. I was in the history department on the faculty as a captain and major. And honestly, I would have gone back to West Point at any rank, in any job. If as a colonel, they'd said, hey, we've got this opportunity for you to go back to West Point and serve, I would have done it in a heartbeat. I just so respect and love that place. So to go back there in that capacity was not something I ever imagined would be possible. It took my leaders 2 or 3 times to tell me, yes, Diana, you have been selected to go back there, because I just couldn't believe it. While there, I learned a lot. being a part of the development of the next generation of leaders is such a privilege, and not one that anyone takes lightly. The opportunity to mentor and coach and sometimes make some decisions about their future. Sometimes they don't like some of those decisions, but always mindful that they're going to go out and do something really, really important, which is to lead America's sons and daughters. It's a pretty big deal and such an honor. You know, I try to remind them what that meant. You know, being a cadet is one thing, and it is, while it is similar in some ways to being an officer in the Army, it is also different. And trying to show them what that looks like and how what they're doing at West Point does translate. Even the things that seem dumb do translate to being a good leader and the leader that we need for the future of our Army. I walked away from that even more impressed with this generation. I think they are just as patriotic as I was. They are just as selfless as my generation was. And I'm really excited for our Army. I am not worried about the future of our Army and the future leaders, because I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of those young folks, and that either went to West Point or through ROTC, and our Army's in good hands.
General, let's switch gears just a little bit. Would you talk a little bit about the work you've done in terms of hurricane relief efforts on behalf of the Corps of Engineers?
I would love to. So I've had many hurricane experiences, unfortunately. One of the common threads through each year that I've been in the Corps of Engineers, I came to the Corps after West Point in 2017. And I didn't know a lot about it. I've always been on the operational side of our branch, of the engineer branch. And it was in 2017 as a brigadier general that I came to the Corps. And so my eyes were open as to what the Corps does in disaster response, but following any type of disaster. But in my experience, an awful lot of hurricanes. What I learned, first of all, I learned that, the federal response is very holistic. It's not just the Corps of Engineers. It's not just a state. It's not just, individual entities. It takes every agency and every level of government to cooperate and to be on the same team to help fellow Americans in their time of greatest need. And so my first hurricane experience was Hurricane Irma in 2017, as it went over the U.S. Virgin Islands and the state of Florida. At the time, I was commanding the South Atlantic Division, which oversees the southeastern United States and the Caribbean islands. And so I first learned what the Corps does in this capacity in Hurricane Irma, to be followed up about 3 weeks later by Hurricane Maria, which made another pass over a third island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then, of course, what we probably know more about than anything anywhere else is what it did to the island of Puerto Rico. And I learned it's amazing how people want to contribute. They are dying to contribute to help, whether it's people in Puerto Rico or the people of the Virgin Islands or the people in Florida. All of these agencies trying to get there as quickly as possible to help. So that year was particularly catastrophic. And the fact that my early experience was on islands, it's even more complicated. The logistics, it's very difficult to get anything there. If it's not pre-positioned on an island, then it's not getting there for a while. Airports are shut down. There's, of course, no highway to drive over a state line like you can do for a Florida or a Louisiana. But it's you do what you can, and you help leaders prioritize. Puerto Rico, I could spend an entire hour talking just about hurricane response in Puerto Rico. Fast forward to the following year in 2018, Hurricane Florence in the Carolinas and Hurricane Michael in the panhandle of Florida were the next two. And then coming to this job in Louisiana is in the command, under the command that I have right now in the Mississippi Valley Division. And there have been 3 named hurricanes just this year. I can say a couple of thoughts that pull all of this together. Every storm is different, and we say that all the time, but it is absolutely true. Even when a storm follows the same path as a previous one, the impacts are going to be different. So you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to adapt, change, your location, move people. Just, don't get too wedded to a plan. Move stuff early, go big, go early, but be ready that you might get it wrong because the path might be completely different. And so learning that flexibility, from a leadership perspective, reminding folks of that, reminding people to be flexible, and having your other courses of action. What are you going to do if? And keeping people in that mindset has really been something that we work very hard at. The other thing is every state responds differently. And so, my relationship with the governor of Puerto Rico was different than my relationship with the governor of the Virgin Islands, was different than the governor of Florida. And then a year later, Carolinas, and now the governor of Louisiana. They all have different, our states have different strengths and weaknesses. And the role of the federal government is to fill in the gap. Where can a territory or a state, what is it that they're short? What capability do they not have? And they're going to ask the federal government for assistance. So one size doesn't fit all. And you've got to be able, we all have to be able to be, again, flexible, and then understand that the relationship is going to be different between the elected officials and you. Some want you real close. Some know what the Corps brings to the response and really wants to hold you close, even if they're not going to need your additional support. And some, don't want the federal government quite so close, and they see us, which we are, the federal government. They don't want us so close. They want to handle it themselves. And of course, I applaud anybody who can handle it themselves, because it's better for all around.
We'll talk a little bit about, General, your current role. You're the commanding general of the Mississippi Valley Division, and you're also now the president of the Mississippi River Commission, which is a first for a woman. So talk about that current assignment.
Another amazing experience in the Army. It's another assignment where I wake up and I ask, how did I get here? How did this happen? How did a girl from Santa Barbara, California, end up commanding a region of the Army Corps of Engineers that oversees the most important waterway in America, and has this unique role as in the Mississippi River Commission. So it is so remarkable. I've really come to appreciate the Mississippi River Basin. I'm not sure that all Americans appreciate what this waterway has done for this country. The fact that it is this transportation system, this economic superhighway, is all within our boundaries, this nation's boundaries, is really one of the main reasons we've had a competitive edge in the global economy. The way it moves products up and down the river, how it moves commodities, how it feeds a global market from the far reaches up north in Minnesota and the other tributaries that contribute to that make their way into the Mississippi River Valley. All of that feeds this global economy and really gives us the edge. I wish, number one, I wish I had appreciated that more before coming to this job. And now that I see it and I'm starting to get a better appreciation for it, I wish everybody understood it. We should not take it for granted. So it's amazing just to understand that capability. I think it's also an interesting region in that because so many states share this amazing terrain feature, it's also a unifier. So different interests work together because they must. The threat of flooding and the benefit of transportation leads people to work together on this common waterway, which is just, it's neat to be a part of that. And the Corps is often an integrator and the agency that helps bring them all together. We set up many meetings and conversations and engagements, bringing people to the table to work together. So it's amazing what can be done when people work together. I've appreciated that. I think the other thing that's interesting about this role is that the partners that we work with, we have a long history together. They aren't partnerships that just came to be in the last 10 years when a particular project of interest drew us together. These relationships are generational. I met somebody who belonged to a levee district, who works on a levee district further north of here, up in the Memphis area. And he was talking about his grandfather being a member of a levee district, which he now is a member of this levee district. And they know the Corps very well. These relationships go back decades. And that's really, I think that's really special to be a part of that history. Again, as I've already alluded to, I enjoy history. I enjoy being a part of history, and this particular region has that vast, deep history. But ultimately, overseeing the 4,500 Department of the Army civilians that work in the Mississippi Valley Division, they're heroes. I mean, just like, I talk about soldiers and the units that I've been in the operational side of the Army, Engineer Battalions and Engineer Brigade that I commanded, and the amazing things that our soldiers do. And I am just as enthusiastic and in awe of the Department of the Army civilians that serve in the Army Corps of Engineers. They whether it's hurricane response, or it's deepening a port, or it's working along smaller projects, big projects in the Mississippi River Valley, what they do across the entire spectrum for the economy, for flood control, protecting people and property, for the environment. What we do for the environment is, I think, probably underappreciated as well. Tremendous respect for them. They are devoted, committed civilian Corps employees, and just really proud to be on their team.
General, have you faced unique challenges due to your gender whilst creating your military career?
So of course, I get asked that quite a bit. And, I want to answer it as honestly as possible. And when I say I don't think that's been a factor, I often get a quizzical look like I'm not being honest. But the reality is that, as far as I know, my gender hasn't really been a factor. I would say a much bigger factor is the fact that I'm so short. Most things in the Army, they didn't have somebody who was 5'1" in mind when they designed our uniforms or our gymnasiums or our equipment or whatever. But I feel like, if I've tried to be value added, I try to support the team. I look for ways that I can help. Perhaps I bring something unique that somebody else on the team doesn't have. I don't think so, but I'm not sure I would know anyway. Certainly nobody has said it to my face. I would say that every so often when I introduce myself or I show up in a new organization, I notice the hesitation when I first explain who I am, and I'm pretty sure maybe they're surprised by, I don't know. But it's been an incredible team experience. And if I didn't feel welcome and an integral part of the success of the organization, I'm in my 30th year of service now, and I wouldn't have been doing it this long if I didn't feel included.
The Army recently changed its selection process for lieutenant colonels. How do you believe that will affect performance of lieutenant colonels?
I think, do you mean for lieutenant colonel command? I think, so there's I assume that's,
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so it's an interesting new development in the Army. It's basically using an additional assessment tool for officers who hope to be battalion commanders, lieutenant colonel commanders. It is still being tested, but it has a cognitive component. We do interviews. It's a double-blind interview. The panel does not see the candidate, and the candidate does not see the panel. So that should, the desire is to reduce unconscious bias that might exist when we only do things looking at paper files, which is the traditional way that we do selections. All the feedback that I've received from lieutenant colonels who have gone through this process has been positive. They feel like they learned a lot. I think they've enjoyed being challenged. I think we find out who really wants to be a battalion commander. And so far, it's been rewarding. We'll see. I think time will tell as we assess how many of those. So the way it works, you first get selected by a board using the traditional model, which is just looking at a file. And then you get invited to go to this separate assessment. And the assessment then feeds into a formula that may or may not move an officer out of command or into command. And you don't know what exactly it was that moved you in or out or up in the OML or down. So we'll see if, we see something different. It's going to take a few years before we know how successful it is and if it's something that we're going to sustain. It is absolutely a wonderful thing to be able to do. It's another tool in talent assessment. And that's ultimately the goal, to pick the best talent to be our battalion commanders and our brigade commanders. We're also doing it now for colonel level command. And we'll just have to see. But so far, everything looks positive, and people are very supportive of it.
Well, the Dole Institute created tonight's event, the Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership lecture, to not only highlight Senator Elizabeth Dole's extraordinary career of public service, but also because young people, college students, others need role models. How important were role models to you in your career, and how important are they to the women who are, say, in West Point today?
I think role models are very important, especially to a younger generation. I had role models. None of them were women. I've never worked for a woman. And so, let me take that back. I didn't have military women role models. I certainly had women role models. It's just that I didn't work for any in the Army. It is important. I think, and I noticed that while I think it really was emphasized to me when I was at West Point as the commandant, that the cadets talked more about wanting to see themselves in leadership, whether it was women seeing other women, African-American cadets seeing African-American leaders, Hispanic cadets seeing Hispanic leaders. It is, I don't know if this is perhaps a change across generations. I don't know if we're just more aware of it, but certainly a younger generation is looking for that. And it is vitally important in a profession that depends on volunteers that they see that in the Army, or they might go elsewhere. We are in a contest, I wouldn't say a battle, but we are competing for talent. We're competing with corporate America. We're competing with other aspects of our society for talent. And we know that diverse teams are more creative and innovative, and study after study after study tells us that diverse teams, whether demographics, what your educational background is, different experiences, that diversity is important to having a team that can come up with creative solutions. And so from a recruiting standpoint, and then from the standpoint of, it's important that our military represents the society it defends. We never want that gap to get too wide, or we are at risk. So I go back to, that's all a long way of saying, if there are many young, talented people out there that are looking, and it may be if they see a role model out there, or somebody that looks like them or has a similar background as them, that they can say, hey, I can do that too. I will join the Army. And once we have them in, then they start to experience, and they see all the value in it, and all of the great things they get to do, and achieving or exceeding their own expectations. And part of that is seeing themselves and the leaders that are around them.
Well, I have one more question tonight. So this is my cue to the audience. If you have questions for General Holland, please submit them through the chat function on YouTube, and we will get to as many as we have time for. Make sure they're in accord with Dole regulation mission of being civil and courteous and appropriate. But my final question, General, is simple, but it's directed at young people. What would you say to a young woman or even a young man who had never really considered a military career about the advantages that they might find in having a military career?
Well, first of all, I'd ask them if they had enough time to hear me out, because I would probably be pretty expressive in that. But I guess I would start with, the opportunities in the Army, I think, are probably underappreciated. Equal pay for equal rank, equal time and grade, just from the pay standpoint, not that that's what I want the first reason for them to join, but is a very equal playing field, and it is very transparent in things like that. The opportunities to see the world. I mean, they aren't kidding. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to be in the Army was to see the world. And I have seen a lot of the world. And I've certainly seen a lot of our own country. The opportunity to be a leader, even if you're not an officer, but and you enlist, whatever level of the Army you come in, you have the opportunity to lead people very, very early on. And having that level of responsibility, I think, is unmatched just about everywhere else, any other profession. So I would be very enthusiastic and encouraging young men, young women, but I would certainly use my own story to tell a young woman, again, I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. And let me tell you, I have seen the world. I have had the opportunity to do hard things with a great team, made great friends, and the Army has exceeded my expectations. And, I would challenge you, I would encourage you to at least step into the ring and try it for one tour, and then decide, all the life skills you get from it, the lifelong friends. I think that would be my pitch to them.
Very good. We have our first audience question, and it's a tough one, I'll warn you, General. You've mentioned many incredible experiences in your life and your service. When was your proudest moment?
Well, I knew I was going to get asked that. It's always a tough one to answer because there have been so many great moments. But, it would be starting with receiving my acceptance letter from the United States Military Academy, where I, spent half my life up to that point getting my resume ready to go to the academy, graduating from the academy. And then, honestly, every assignment, something has happened. The people in the organization have stepped up and they have done great things together. And every single one of those was a proud moment, not because of myself, but just to watch. It is such a team sport. And when you watch your team overcome what you thought were overwhelming odds and exceed what you asked them to do, it's very proud. So I would not be able to pin it down, but included in that list would be watching our cadets at West Point overcome, individuals overcome personal challenges to eventually graduate. There have been many of those that I had the opportunity to see. The units to which I've belonged accomplish a mission in Afghanistan or Iraq, things that we worried about and planned for and wondered if we would be able to succeed, ultimately succeeding. And I would have to admit, probably one of the most heartfelt moments for me was that Engineer Battalion that I commanded in Afghanistan, bringing every soldier home to their family. Being on that parade field with every single one of those soldiers in one piece, and every single one of those families coming out onto the parade field and hugging their soldier, knowing that that everybody had that moment, was pride, all kinds of emotions go into that. That would certainly be towards the top of the list.
Okay, very well. Another question: what preparations and policy changes are the Army and the Corps of Engineers taking to prepare for the challenges of climate change?
Well, that's a great question. The Corps of Engineers I mentioned, I guess I didn't specifically mention it, but we are constantly assessing and doing estimates and looking at our water resources. Of course, that's the foundational mission of the Corps of Engineers is America's water resources. And so we're looking at this quite a bit. Whether it's climate change or something else, there's no doubt that flooding has been more pronounced. We've had more hurricanes, sea level is rising, and so we have to figure out how to do that. And so, we are supporting our states and doing more assessments of what it's going to take to protect the coastline. The Congress is investing in our levees here in the Mississippi River Valley. We have a lot of levees that protect people and property from flooding. So more and more investment from Congress in order to protect people and property. And then I would say the other one would be the science of it, which is, the Corps of Engineers has a community of labs and researchers that are looking at this. We have a scientist that sits in this headquarters and we're constantly looking at how is the Mississippi River changing? What levels is it? Are we able to pass the flow of a historic level flood? Are we able to still do that at this juncture? And if not, what are we going to do about it? And some of that is understanding river science, understanding how the river is changing. It is very dynamic. It is not set in stone that the river will always look like this. It hasn't always looked like this. And so, and yet much of our dependency on this river depends on it staying exact where it is. So how do we leverage science and technology and all of those smart people to help us better understand that? Whether it's because of climate change or any other reason, things are happening with our water resources, and we are investing heavily in that.
Okay, I have another question here. I'm sorry, I kind of misplaced it. Our politics are becoming more polarized, not the team spirit that you speak of in the military. How will our military leaders need to prepare for potential polarized change every 4 years?
Well, in a way, it's easy because when you wear the uniform, there's a certain posture that you have to have. And that first of all, we have a very big mission. We, the military, have a very big mission to defend our nation and to do things in the national interest and the things that the American people want us to do. And that alone is pretty all-consuming. I think, it's very clear what we can and can't participate in. This is, in my opinion, in my career, while there's always been times of polarization, there's often been very dynamic debate. And I think we, as General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, frequently tells us, frequently reminds all of the armed forces, we support the Constitution. We have a mission to protect our nation and the American people, and do what our Congress and the American people tell us to do. And in a way, it can be easier when you wear the uniform and people expect that you're not going to be political. I think, it's one of the advantages in the Corps of Engineers, though. So the Corps of Engineers is 36,000 strong. 2% of the Corps of Engineers wears the uniform like I do. And we're mostly in the leadership positions. And I think one of the things that makes the Corps of Engineers a trusted entity within the federal government is because it is led by Army officers that everybody on all sides of the spectrum understand that we aren't there to act on behalf of a political party. We represent what Congress has told us to do and what Congress has paid us to do. So the projects that we build, the projects, and sometimes they take 20 or 30 years from start to finish, from initial conception to actual execution and completion, that we follow the legislation and we follow the policies. And that does not change very quickly. Our work doesn't change that quickly every 4 years. And so I think that's one of the benefits that the Corps of Engineers has, and why we have our portfolio is even getting bigger. Every year is a new level of funding from the Congress. And I think that's because they see us as a trusted entity and a transparent one to do the nation's bidding and to spend taxpayer to execute America's taxpayer dollars. So, I hope I answered that question.
Yes. We have time for one last question, General. This is an interesting one based on your earlier comments. You mentioned the snowshoe behind you. Could you talk about the significance of the other awards, photos, and keepsakes behind you on your wall?
Okay, well, let's see. So on this side, that's my diploma from West Point. Let's see. So the snowshoe, and then further over, the bottom picture, that's a scene from Fort Drum. And then there's a statue at Fort Drum representing Fort Drum soldiers climbing the face of a mountain in World War II. That picture up there is me with my command sergeant major and the two majors. So the four of us were the leader team of the 92nd Engineer Battalion. We're standing in front of our headquarters building in Sharana, Afghanistan. The flags behind me, of course, is the American flag, then is the Army flag with all the campaign streamers, and then the Corps of Engineers flag. And then on the far, this way, the last flag over there is a general officer flag. It's got 2 stars on it, representing that's who occupies this office. On the rest of my wall that you can't see, over on this wall is a bunch of things from West Point. And then on the other side are all the organizations that I've had the privilege to lead, taking the guide on the colors of that unit that have been framed with a little plaque in there, letting the reader know what organization that was and what years I was there. So a lot, things that mean a lot to me and have meant a lot to me over my career.
I can certainly understand that. Well, General, this has been a delightful, entertaining, and educational evening. You're a great role model for our students, both men and women, and we're delighted that you could be with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate what you all do for veterans. Of course, really appreciate Senator and Senator Dole. They've been household names in my lifetime. Appreciate their public service and just what the whole Institute does for our nation. So thank you for having me and giving me this platform to talk a little bit about the Army.
You bet. It was terrific. To our audience, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Again, as a reminder, we're doing that drive-through from 9 to 11 in the Dole Institute parking lot for veterans and veterans families Saturday. And then next Thursday night here at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel, you can join us for a discussion with U.S. Trade Rep Bob Lighthizer, who is an aide to President Reagan, very influential and important aide to Senator Bob Dole, and Senator Dole was chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. And we'd love to see you here. I think you'll really enjoy that. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you for joining the Dole Institute of Politics for our program this evening. If you are a student and would like to join the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board, please contact us by emailing dolesab@ku.edu. Refer to doleinstitute.org for up-to-date information on all of our upcoming programs. If you enjoyed tonight's program, consider becoming a friend of the Dole Institute by donating to help make programs like this possible. We hope you enjoyed this evening's program. Thank you and good night.
Music time. I wasn't sure if I was going to say anything else.